Clara Finch doesn't remember what happened last night, but the badge on her chest, the blood on her hands, and the empty cell down the hall say she may be the sheriff now and possibly a murderer. The sun beat down on Redemption, Arizona, even at what Clara guessed was barely past dawn. Her head throbbed like a runaway stagecoach, each pulse a fresh wave of nausea. Where was she? Blinking, she focused on the rough-hewn beams above. Not her room. The air smelled of stale whiskey and gun oil. Panic flickered, she pushed herself up, wincing. That's when she saw it, a tarnished, five-pointed star pinned to her chest. Sheriff, the sheriff's badge, how her fingers fumbled with the cold metal. Then she noticed her hands, stained a dark, crusty brown. Blood, a choked gasp escaped her lips. Blood, whose? Jedediah, the sheriff, where was he? Clara scrambled out of the bed, the sheriff's oversized shirt falling to her knees. The room was a mess, papers strewn about, a half-empty bottle on the floor. It looked like a struggle had taken place, but she remembered nothing, absolutely nothing. The last thing she recalled was a drink at the Golden Spur Saloon. After that, a blank. A loud cheer erupted outside. Sheriff Finch, Sheriff Finch. Clara froze. Finch, sheriff, they thought she was the sheriff now? This was madness, madness indeed. Clara stumbled to the window, peering through the dusty glass. A crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office, faces beaming up at her. They were chanting her name, a name she barely recognized as her own in this context. Sheriff Finch, Sheriff Finch. These people, they thought she was their protector, their law, but she was anything but. Guilt gnawed at her. She didn't deserve their trust. She had to get out of here, figure out what happened to Jedediah and clear her name, or face the consequences if she truly was responsible. But how could she do that with the entire town watching her every move? Taking a deep breath, Clara forced herself to think, play the part. For now, she had to play the part of Sheriff Finch. It was the only way to buy herself time to uncover the truth. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed down the oversized shirt, and pinned the badge more securely to her chest. She had to find out what happened to Jedediah, even if it meant facing a darkness she'd tried so hard to bury. "All right," she muttered to herself, her voice barely a whisper. "Let's see what a sheriff does." The blood, she couldn't ignore it. It was dried and cracked, clinging to her skin like a second, sinister glove. Was it Jedediah's or someone else's? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Clara headed for the wash basin in the corner, the cold water stinging her skin as she scrubbed. The blood resisted, clinging stubbornly. As she scrubbed, a faint metallic scent filled the air. It smelled like old coins. She glanced at her reflection in the cracked mirror above the basin. A stranger stared back, wide-eyed, disheveled, and marked with the stain of violence. This wasn't the life she wanted. She'd come to Redemption seeking peace, a quiet escape from her past, but her past, it seemed, had a way of finding her. As the last traces of blood swirled down the drain, a glint of metal caught her eye. On the floor, half hidden beneath the bed, lay a small, ornate knife. The handle was inlaid with silver, and the blade was clean. Too clean, had someone wiped it. Clara picked it up, the cold steel a stark contrast to her trembling hand. This wasn't Jedediah's style. He favored a simple, practical revolver. So whose was it, and what was it doing here? The mystery deepened, and the weight of the sheriff's badge felt heavier than ever. Jedediah, where was he? Clara tucked the ornate knife into her boot. She had to find him, and fast. The longer he was missing, the worse it looked for her. She cautiously opened the door, stepping out onto the porch. The crowd roared its approval. A burly man with a handlebar mustache pushed his way to the front. "Sheriff Finch, glad to see you're up and about. We were gettin' worried." "Mornin'," Clara managed, her voice raspy, just a bit under the weather. She scanned the crowd. "Has anyone seen Jedediah?" The burly man frowned. "Jedediah, ain't seen him since yesterday evenin'. Figured he was just sleepin' in." A woman in a faded calico dress spoke up. "Heard some shouting common from the saloon last night. Maybe he was just having a bit too much fun." Clara's stomach twisted. "Shouting? Do you know who he was arguing with?" The woman shrugged. "Just sounded like a couple of fellas gettin' riled up, didn't pay it much mind." No one seemed overly concerned about Jedediah's absence, as if it wasn't unusual for the sheriff to simply disappear. But Clara knew better. Something was terribly wrong. She had to find out what. And she had to do it before the town realized their new sheriff was as lost as they were. The townsfolk's misplaced faith weighed heavily on Clara. She was an outsider, a newcomer to Redemption. Why would they so readily accept her as their sheriff? Was Jedediah that unpopular, or was there something else at play? As if on cue, the burly man spoke again. We heard Jedediah resigned, Sheriff Finch. Said he was tired of the job, said you were just the person to take over. Resigned, Jedediah would never resign, not without a fight. Something was definitely wrong. He didn't say anything to me about that, Clara said carefully. When did he tell you this? Yesterday afternoon down at the Golden Spur, the man replied. Said he was headin' out first thing this mornin'. The Golden Spur, that's where she'd had her last drink before everything went black. Had Jedediah been there too? Had he said something to her? Clara forced a smile. Well, I appreciate your support, but right now I need to, check on a few things. Business as usual, you know. The crowd dispersed, still murmuring their congratulations and offering their support. Clara watched them go, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She had to get to the Golden Spur. It was the only place she could think of to start piecing together the shattered fragments of last night, and maybe, just maybe, find a clue to Jedediah's whereabouts. The Golden Spur saloon was dimly lit and smelled of stale beer and sawdust. The midday sun barely pierced the grimy windows. A few cowboys nursed their drinks at the bar, their faces etched with the harsh realities of frontier life. Clara walked in, the sheriff's badge glinting in the gloom. All eyes turned to her. She could feel their scrutiny, their silent questions. "Mornin', Sheriff," the bartender, a wiry man with a walrus mustache, greeted her. "What can I get for you?" "Just information," Clara said, her voice low. "I understand Jedediah was here yesterday." The bartender wiped down the counter with a rag. "Yep, he was." "Did he say anything about resigning?" The bartender hesitated, his eyes darting around the saloon. "Said he was tired, said he was ready for a change." "Did he say where he was going?" The bartender shook his head. "Nope, just said he was leavin'." Clara leaned closer. "Did you see him arguing with anyone?" The bartender's eyes flickered again. "Now, Sheriff, I see a lot of things in this saloon. I don't always remember 'em all." He paused. There was a bit of a dust-up between him and Bob the rancher, over some land dispute, I think. Bob the rancher, that was a name to remember. Anything else? Clara pressed. Just that Jedediah seemed agitated more than usual. The bartender shrugged. "That's all I know, Sheriff." Clara knew he wasn't telling her everything, but it was a start. Jedediah had argued with Bob and he'd told people he was leaving, but something about the story didn't add up, and the gaping hole in her memory made it impossible to know what part she played in it all. She truly felt like an imposter in her own life. As Clara stepped out of the Golden Spur, the image of the ornate knife flashed in her mind. It felt familiar, but how? Suddenly, a jolt of memory, sharp and unwelcome, pierced her consciousness. Flashback. A grand ballroom glittering with chandeliers. Clara, much younger, dressed in a lavish gown, her hair piled high. Laughter, music, champagne, flutes clinking, but the joy was a mask. A stern-faced man, her father, gripping her arm, his voice a low growl. "You will marry him, Clara. It is your duty." She pulled away, her eyes blazing. "I won't be a pawn in your game." A struggle, a scream. The glint of silver as she grabbed a letter opener from a nearby desk, an ornate letter opener with a silver handle. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Clara breathless and shaken. The letter opener, the knife, could they be the same? She stumbled, clutching her head. That life, she'd buried it, run as far as she could. She'd changed her name, her appearance, everything. But it was still there, lurking beneath the surface, threatening to drag her back into the darkness. Was that why she felt so guilty, not just about Jedediah, but about everything? Had she always been destined for this kind of trouble? She had to push those thoughts aside. She had to focus on finding Jedediah. But the flashback had planted a seed of doubt, a chilling question. Was she truly capable of something terrible? Despite her inner turmoil, Clara knew she couldn't afford to dwell on the past. Jedediah's disappearance was the immediate problem, and she had to act like a sheriff, even if she didn't feel like one. She started by heading towards Bob's ranch. It was a sprawling property on the outskirts of town, the air thick with the smell of cattle and dust. Clara found Bob mending a fence, his face weathered and hard. "Bob," Clara said, her voice firm, "I need to ask you some questions about Jedediah." Bob straightened up, wiping his brow with a bandana. "Jedediah, what's he done now?" "He's missing," Clara said. "I understand you two had a disagreement yesterday." Bob scoffed. "Disagreement? We had a full-blown argument. That land he's been eyeing, it's mine, fair and square. My family's been working it for generations." "Did it get heated?" Clara asked. "Heated enough," Bob admitted. "But I didn't lay a hand on him. I just told him to stay off my property." Clara studied him carefully. He seemed genuinely angry, but not necessarily guilty. "Did you see him leave town?" Bob shook his head. "Nope, haven't seen him since yesterday afternoon, but I wouldn't shed a tear if he never came back." Clara knew she wasn't getting the whole story, but she had a feeling Bob wasn't directly involved in Jedediah's disappearance. He was too obvious, too quick to admit to the argument. There was someone else, someone hiding in the shadows, and Clara was determined to find them. Back in town, Clara decided to check the hotel registry. Jedediah might have been keeping track of visitors, especially anyone who seemed out of place. The hotel clerk, a nervous young man with spectacles, reluctantly handed over the ledger. Clara scanned the entries, her eyes searching for anything unusual. Then she saw it, Marlene Dubois from Tucson. She'd checked in 3 days ago and hadn't checked out. Tucson was a long way from redemption. What would a woman like that be doing here? Clara asked the clerk if he knew where Marlene was. "She's been spending a lot of time at the Golden Spur," the clerk stammered. "Seemed real friendly with Sheriff Jedediah." Friendly, that was an understatement, judging by the clerk's nervous tone. Clara had a feeling Marlene Dubois was more than just a casual acquaintance. She headed back to the Golden Spur, a growing sense of urgency gnawing at her. Jedediah had secrets, enemies, and a mysterious woman from out of town. The pieces were starting to come together, but she still couldn't see the whole picture, and time was running out. She needed to find Marlene Dubois, and she needed to find her now. The blood on her hands felt heavier than ever. The guilt was a constant companion now, a shadow clinging to Clara's heels. As she walked, fragmented images flashed through her mind like broken pieces of a mirror. Flashback snippets. A frantic flight through dark streets. A whispered promise, "I'll never go back." The burning sensation of tears and regret, a face blurred and indistinct, contorted with anger and pain. Each flash was a painful reminder of the life she'd left behind, the choices she'd made. She didn't know the full story of what happened that night with her father, but she knew she'd run, leaving a trail of broken relationships and unanswered questions. Was redemption just another escape? Was she doomed to repeat the mistakes of her past? The more she investigated Jedediah's disappearance, the more she questioned her own motives. Was she trying to clear her name, or was she simply trying to run away again? She paused, leaning against a wooden post, the weight of her past threatening to crush her. She needed to be strong to focus on the present. But the memories kept coming, whispering doubts and fueling her self-doubt. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Maybe she was destined to be an outsider, forever haunted by the shadows of her past. Still, Marlene was the best light, and she was at the Golden Spur. Clara had to keep going. Before entering the Golden Spur, Clara decided to retrace her steps from the previous night, hoping to jog her memory. She walked along the dusty street, past the general store and the blacksmith's, trying to recall anything at all. Near the edge of town, just past the last building, she spotted something glinting in the dirt. It was a small piece of fabric, torn and faded, but the distinctive floral pattern caught her eye. She picked it up, examining it closely. The fabric was silk, expensive silk. Suddenly, she remembered seeing Marlene Dubois earlier that day, wearing a dress with a similar floral pattern. A chill ran down Clara's spine. This piece of fabric, it had to be from Marlene's dress. And it was found near where Jedediah was last seen. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Had Marlene been involved in Jedediah's disappearance? Had they argued? Had something worse happened? The blood on her hands seemed to throb in time with her heartbeat. She had to find Marlene, and she had to find her now. This piece of fabric was the first solid clue she'd found, and it pointed directly at the mysterious woman from Tucson. The truth, she sensed, was about to be revealed, and she wasn't sure she was ready for it. Clara found Marlene Dubois at a table in the back of the Golden Spur, nursing a drink. Her floral dress was indeed missing a small piece of fabric near the hem. Clara approached her, the sheriff's badge gleaming. "Marlene Dubois, I need to ask you some questions about Jedediah." Marlene's eyes widened, but she didn't seem surprised. "What about him?" Clara held out the torn piece of fabric. "Recognize this." Marlene's face paled. She grabbed the fabric, examining it closely. "Where did you find this?" "Near the edge of town," Clara said, "where Jedediah was last seen." Marlene sighed, running a hand through her hair. "All right, Sheriff, you got me. Jedediah and we were having an affair." Clara's jaw dropped. "An affair?" "Yes," Marlene said, her voice tight. "But I didn't hurt him. We argued, yes. I wanted him to leave with me to start a new life, but he refused." "What did you argue about?" Clara pressed. "Money," Marlene said. "Jedediah had been skimming money from the town for years. I found out and I wanted my share. He said he'd give it to me, then he changed his mind. I think he ran off with it all." Marlene's eyes flashed with anger. "He's a thief and a liar." Clara wasn't sure what to believe, but one thing was clear. Marlene Dubois had a motive, and she wasn't afraid to point the finger at Jedediah. Marlene's accusation against Jedediah left Clara with more questions than answers. Could Jedediah really be a thief? And if so, was Marlene telling the truth, or was she trying to cover something up? Despite Marlene's story, Clara decided to revisit Bob, the rancher. She needed to see if his story held up now that she knew about Jedediah's alleged corruption. She found Bob in the same place as before, mending the fence. He looked surprised to see her again. "Sheriff," he said, his voice wary, "what brings you back?" "I have some more questions about Jedediah," Clara said. "I know you argued about the land, but was there anything else?" Bob hesitated. "Well, there was talk that Jedediah was lining his pockets, skimming money from the town." "Did you ever see him do anything suspicious?" Clara asked. Bob shook his head. "No, but I heard things, enough to make me distrust him. That land dispute, it wasn't just about the land. It was about principle. Jedediah was corrupt, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it." "Did you see him the night he disappeared?" Clara asked. Bob sighed. "Like I said, I argued with him, but I didn't hurt him. I swear, Sheriff, I just wanted him gone." Clara studied his face. He seemed sincere, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still holding something back. Everyone in this town had secrets, and Clara was starting to feel like she was drowning in them. As Clara walked back towards town, another memory surfaced, this one clearer and more disturbing than the others. Flashback. The Golden Spur Saloon the previous night. Clara, already a bit tipsy, was sitting at the bar when Jedediah approached her. "Clara," he said, his voice low and menacing, "I know about you, about your past." Clara's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "I know who you really are," Jedediah sneered. "And I know why you ran away. Unless you want everyone in Redemption to know, you're going to do what I say." "You wouldn't," Clara hissed. "Oh, I would," Jedediah said, his eyes glinting with malice. "Consider this your last chance." The memory ended abruptly, leaving Clara shaken. Jedediah knew about her past. He was blackmailing her. That's why she was in his room that night. That's why she had blood on her hands. But what had happened after that? What had she done? The pieces were falling into place, but the central piece, the one that would reveal her own involvement, remained elusive. The weight of the sheriff's badge felt unbearable now. She was supposed to uphold the law, but she was starting to suspect she was the one who had broken it. Clara sat on the porch of the sheriff's office, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Jedediah had discovered her past and was using it to blackmail her. She'd gone to his office that night to confront him, to beg him to keep her secret. They had argued, their voices rising in anger. He'd threatened to expose her to the entire town, to ruin the new life she'd built. She remembered pushing him, shoving him away. He'd stumbled, hitting his head on the corner of his desk. Then nothing, just a blur of panic and confusion. She must have blacked out. She hadn't meant to hurt him. It was an accident, but the blood on her hands, it was real. She had caused it. But if she had only knocked him unconscious, where was he now? And who had taken him? Marlene's story about Jedediah stealing money, it seemed plausible, but it didn't explain everything. Someone else was involved, someone who had seen an opportunity to take advantage of the situation. Someone who knew about the argument about Jedediah's blackmail, someone like Bob. Clara's eyes narrowed. Bob had admitted to arguing with Jedediah. He had a motive, and he had the means. She had to confront him again. She had to know the truth. Clara rode out to Bob's ranch, her mind racing. She imagined the scene, Bob arriving at the sheriff's office after hearing the commotion. Seeing Jedediah unconscious, an opportunity had presented itself. He could rob the sheriff, frame Clara for the crime, and finally get rid of him for good. But where would he hide him? Suddenly, she remembered something Bob had mentioned earlier. My family's been working it for generations. What had his family been working? Mining. There was an abandoned mine on Bob's property, a relic of a bygone era. It was the perfect place to hide a body. Clara spurred her horse onward, the image of Jedediah trapped in the dark, cold mine fueling her determination. She had to stop Bob. She had to save Jedediah, even if he was a corrupt blackmailer, and she had to clear her name once and for all. She arrived at the ranch, her horse skidding to a halt in front of Bob. He looked surprised, then wary. "Bob," Clara said, her voice hard, "I know what you did." Bob's face tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sheriff." "The mine, Bob," Clara said. "I know you hid him there." Bob's eyes flickered, betraying his guilt. "You can't prove anything." "I don't need proof," Clara said, drawing her revolver. "I just need to know where he is." Bob, realizing he was caught, lunged for his rifle. Clara, reacting instinctively, fired a shot into the air. The sound echoed across the ranch, startling a flock of birds into flight. "Don't be a fool, Bob," Clara shouted. "It's over." But Bob wasn't listening. He grabbed his rifle and scrambled towards the hills, heading towards the abandoned mine. Clara mounted her horse and gave chase, her knowledge of the town and its surrounding terrain giving her an advantage. She knew the shortcuts, the hidden trails. Flashback snippet. A young Clara dressed in rough clothes, scaling a rocky cliff face. Her father, a gruff but loving man, teaching her how to navigate the wilderness. "Always know your surroundings, Clara," he'd said. "It could save your life one day." The memory faded, replaced by the urgency of the present. She pushed her horse to its limit, her eyes fixed on Bob's retreating figure. She knew the mine was dangerous, unstable. If Jedediah was inside, his life was hanging by a thread. She had to catch Bob, and she had to do it fast. The fate of Jedediah and her own future depended on it. The mine was dark and treacherous, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. Clara dismounted, her revolver drawn, and cautiously entered the narrow opening. "Bob," she shouted, her voice echoing through the tunnels. "It's over, let Jedediah go." A shot rang out from the darkness, narrowly missing her. Clara ducked behind a support beam, her heart pounding. Bob was waiting for her, and he wasn't going to give up without a fight. She moved slowly, carefully, using her knowledge of the mine's layout to her advantage. She remembered her father's lessons, the importance of knowing your surroundings. She used her ears, listening for any sound, any clue to Bob's location. She heard a faint groan, followed by the shuffling of feet. Jedediah was alive. Clara moved towards the sound, her senses on high alert. She rounded a corner and saw Bob standing over Jedediah, who was tied to a support beam. "Stay back, Sheriff," Bob shouted, his rifle aimed at Jedediah's head. "One more step and he's dead." Clara knew she had to act fast. She couldn't risk Jedediah's life. She took a deep breath. Thinking quickly, Clara noticed a loose pile of rocks near her feet. She kicked them, sending them tumbling towards Bob. The distraction was enough. As Bob flinched, Clara lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. They wrestled, the rifle clattering away. Clara, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to redeem herself, managed to disarm Bob and pin him down. "It's over, Bob," she said, her voice breathless. "Tell me what happened." Bob, defeated, finally confessed. He admitted to finding Jedediah unconscious in his office, to robbing him and framing Clara, and to hiding him in the mine. Clara quickly untied Jedediah. He was weak and disoriented, but alive. "Is it true?" Clara asked him, her voice barely a whisper. "Did Bob do this?" Jedediah nodded weakly. He robbed me, left me to die." Clara's heart sank, Bob had confirmed her worst fears, but at least Jedediah was alive, and she had stopped Bob before it was too late. She helped Jedediah sit up. "Thank you, Clara," Jedediah said, his voice raspy. "You saved my life." "I didn't do it for you," Clara said, her voice firm. "I did it to clear my name and to make things right." With Bob apprehended and Jedediah safely out of the mine, Clara led them back to town. The news of Bob's treachery spread like wildfire. The townsfolk, initially wary of Clara, now hailed her as a true hero. Bob was locked away in the jail, his reputation ruined. Jedediah, still recovering from his ordeal, confirmed Bob's story to everyone. He also admitted to his blackmailing Clara. The town was shocked. They had trusted Jedediah, but he had betrayed them. And they had doubted Clara, but she had saved them. As Clara walked through the streets, the townsfolk cheered her name. Sheriff Finch, they finally accepted her, not as a replacement for Jedediah, but as their own rightful protector. But Clara felt conflicted. She had cleared her name, but at what cost? She had uncovered a web of lies and deceit, and she had been forced to confront the darkest parts of herself. She looked down at the sheriff's badge, the tarnished metal gleaming in the sun. She had earned it not through a mistake or an accident, but through courage and determination. But did she deserve it? Could she truly be the sheriff this town needed? The decision was hers to make. The question was, did she want it? Clara looked out at the town, at the faces of the people who now trusted her, who believed in her. She had run from her past for so long, but she couldn't run anymore. She had to face it, to accept it, and to use it to make a difference. Jedediah, still recovering, offered her the badge, his voice filled with remorse. "You earned it, Clara. You're a better sheriff than I ever was." Clara hesitated. Could she really stay? Could she truly embrace this new identity? Then she looked at the faces of the townsfolk, at their hope, at their trust, and she knew what she had to do. She took the badge, pinning it firmly to her chest. "I'll stay," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I'll be your sheriff." She knew it wouldn't be easy. She would have to confront her past, to deal with her guilt, and to learn to trust herself. But she was ready. She was no longer running. She was standing her ground. Clara Finch, the woman who had arrived in redemption-seeking escape, had finally found her purpose. And though the question of her past still lingered, she was ready to build a new future, one where she used her experience, her strength, and her courage to help others. The woman in the mirror finally looked like someone she could be proud of. She would wear the badge.